Live from Washington, D.C., Jay Sekulow Live. Phone lines are open for your questions right now. And now, Chief Counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, Jay Sekulow.
پرچم شیطان است، پرچم شیطان بزرگم، مرگ بر اسرائیل، مرگ بر امریکا.
Graphic new video of violent protests and terror attacks coming out of Israel.
They have a gender apartheid inside Gaza. Christians are evacuating because churches are being burned. Their doctrine is fascist and genocidal against Jews.
Today, the group Hamas declared a day of rage, urging attacks on Israelis.
Peace has no greater enemy than the forces of militant Islam.
Any moment, you know, these rockets and missiles on the border with Lebanon could be sprung and fired against Israel.
Iran gets nuclear weapons, Saudi Arabia will, Egypt will, Turkey, perhaps others. So in 5 to 10 years, you could have a multipolar nuclear Middle East with half a dozen countries with nuclear weapons. That is a formula for insecurity.
Hamas and Al-Qaeda are these terrorist groups with the goal of destroying the West.
We got multiple officers here. We got officers running here, back eastbound, chasing, now on foot.
So we understand people are scared, and we understand that there's concern that there may be more folks out there.
When they say that Israel should be wiped out, that they mean it?
I don't have the luxury not to believe this.
Israel's right to exist has been a cornerstone for the ACLJ since its inception. With an office in the heart of Jerusalem, ACLJ continues to be a leader in the advocacy for the Jewish state of Israel. Chief Counsel Jay Sekulow has brought together ACLJ's leading experts from around the globe to present Protecting the Promised Land, the Case for Israel.
Hey, welcome to Jay Sekulow Live. There's a lot to talk about today. We wanted to use this opportunity to really get you up to speed on what the American Center for Law and Justice has been doing, our legal work, our policy work here in the United States and around the world. When it comes to other issues involving Israel that we discussed earlier in the week, we're very involved at the American Center for Law and Justice. But there are a lot of cases. There's a lot of issues that we can't get to every day on Jay Sekulow Live because we try to provide you with up-to-the-minute analysis. A lot of you get the broadcast live, are looking to us as a news source and a news analysis source, so to take the news of the day and analyze it for you so that you're well-informed. So when we're spending our time doing that, I encourage a lot of you to go to ACLJ.org and see all of the work that we're doing at the American Center for Law and Justice. It's a whole lot more than the one or maybe two topics that we get to on air here on Jay Sekulow Live. So there are times and opportunities on our radio broadcast where we want to get you up to speed because we ask for your support. You know, we have a matching challenge right now at ACLJ.org as we come towards the end of the month. Right now, again, it's a great time to support the work of the ACLJ because your donation is doubled. And that's at ACLJ.org. But a lot of times on the show, you might be hearing us talk about a news issue and not say, hey, wait, where is this going exactly? Not just for this broadcast, but for all the work that the American Center for Law and Justice is doing. So you can go to ACLJ.org, but you can also listen to today's broadcast and really get up to speed on that as well and learn a lot about what the ACLJ is doing. We have attorneys all over the country working on cases, pro-life cases, Planned Parenthood cases, cases involving the state of Israel, the news of the day, but also some that don't get as much attention, international issues. We have offices around the world active at the UN. So what we wanted to do was really to get you into this specifically and let you kind of know what is going on at the ACLJ. What are you supporting specifically right now if you're donating to the American Center for Law and Justice? And I will tell you that even on this broadcast, I can't get into everything. We can't discuss it all in one radio broadcast. It would take weeks to discuss all of the different cases we've got, and that's cases in court that we have, or pending before the Supreme Court, or in international tribunals, and then, of course, all of the policy and government affairs work that we do as well. Now, one place that does that, though, is our website, and that's at aclj.org. At aclj.org, you can also support the work of the ACLJ. What do I mean? We have a matching challenge right now. Whatever you're able to donate online is doubled for the American Center for Law and Justice at aclj.org. So you go online, you'll see a donate button right now, and you can see all the work that we're doing. And I think that is a wonderful resource for you, which we don't always get to talk about in this radio broadcast, and support that work directly, because none of it happens. This show doesn't come to you, but all those other issues that you see us working on, that does not occur without your support. Be part of the matching challenge. It only goes until the end of the month at aclj.org. We'll be right back.
It is a critical time for our nation, and the American Center for Law and Justice is on the front lines, defending life and liberty, engaging the issues that matter most to you and your family. Whether it's working to protect Americans from the dangers of radical Islam and the persecution of Christians, to defending life at the U.S. Supreme Court, to protecting your religious and constitutional freedoms, we could not do this work without you, without your support. And now your support can really make a tremendous difference. For a limited time, you can participate in the ACLJ Matching Challenge. If you make a gift now, it will be doubled. $25 becomes $50. A $100 gift becomes $200. Please stand with the ACLJ right now and call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or go online at aclj.org. Thank you for your support.
Iranians have stated openly, simply, openly, that they want to destroy the state of Israel. Period. Exclamation point.
They speak of illegitimacy in the names of God. From Iran, from Hezbollah, and from Hamas, you hear that it's a religious commandment that Israel should not exist, that a non-Muslim state cannot be here. If this has the upper hand, this trend, it's going to be tougher. This layer of religious fanaticism on top of political debates makes debates almost without a resolution. Because, you know, gods never compromise. People do.
You're dealing with a regime headed up by a religious fanatic. The Ayatollah in Iran has a religious view that has no place for the state of Israel, fellow Muslims who disagree with him, and our country. He is a religious Nazi. On the day we voted on the Iran nuclear deal, he tweeted out, Allah willing, Israel won't exist in 25 years.
Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei posted incendiary comments about Israel. He flatly predicted that Israel won't be around 25 years from now.
And he warned that between now and then, Israel would have to worry about what he called the, quote, spirit of fighting heroism and jihad.
Today, after 2 years of negotiations, the United States, together with our international partners, has achieved something that decades of animosity has not. A comprehensive long-term deal with Iran that will prevent it from obtaining a nuclear weapon.
A bad deal is worse than no deal. We need to have a good deal here.
This deal will not stop Iran from getting a bomb.
this deal will all but guarantee it.
The Iranian nuclear deal may actually be worse than we originally imagined.
I think the deal is absolutely horrible for us, but it's really, really bad for Israel.
And we're handing over hundreds of billions of dollars in sanctions relief.
Iran is going to have access to $150 billion in assets.
Israelis have been telling us, this kind of deal is giving Iran the legitimacy to enrich uranium.
Once Iran is able to perform a nuclear test, it would have a shield, a nuclear mushroom all over Iran that would deter the US and Israel from doing anything to retaliate against Iran or work against Iran when it supposed jihadist groups in the Middle East or worldwide.
If Iran gets nuclear weapons, Saudi Arabia will, Egypt will, Turkey, perhaps others. So in 5 to 10 years, you could have a multipolar nuclear Middle East with half a dozen countries with nuclear weapons. That is a formula for insecurity.
Think of how arrogant Hezbollah will act, and Hamas, if Iran wins and it gets nuclear. So I think the stakes are very high.
If Iran gets the bomb, even if it doesn't use it, it would alter profoundly the history of the Middle East.
Iran's rulers promised to destroy my country, murder my people. And the response from this body, the response from nearly every one of the governments represented here has been absolutely nothing. Utter silence. Deafening silence.
We have to talk about America's interests in the region, and that's starting with our defense as a country of Israel and why it's strategically important.
Absolutely. I was at a meeting not long ago, within the last year and a half, with the Egyptian consul in New York. And it was a meeting of members of Congress and a couple of people from think tanks. And the ambassador, he was pleading with us, saying, why don't you see the threat? He said, why don't you see the threat from the region? It's a threat to your country. It's a threat to your country before any other country. He said, we see it. We know we have Egyptian nationals in this country, and they go to mosques where they're being radicalized. And we know if Iran gets this nuclear deal, which they now have, right, we will absolutely have to get nuclear weapons. The Saudis will absolutely have to get nuclear weapons because, and here's how you know the truth. Israel has had a nuclear capability, the secret that everyone knows, for decades. And there's not been an arms race. There's not been a nuclear race in the Middle East because they know Israel will not first launch. Israel just wants a defensive capability. But they know that's not true about Iran. So first you know that Iran will use it. The second thing is Iran is developing intercontinental ballistic missiles not to reach Israel, but to reach us in this country.
Let's talk, Mark, about this. Israel's an ally of the United States, but this ongoing conflict, you look at it historically, over the modern time of Israel's existence, the last 70 years, this ongoing conflict has been continuous. And the fact is sometimes it's different players coming to the forefront. Now it's Iran. But the regional conflict focused on Israel, there's a historic record that is indisputable.
If you just look at the modern era, from 1920, Israel's given this wonderful small area for close settlement of the land in the San Remo Treaty. And then in 1922, the League of Nations sets up a mandate. Israel's finally going to have a place where Jews can come and settle. And then 78% of it is lopped off and given to Transjordan. And you think, all right, fine, the Jews will remain in that last 22%. Then the first plan, the Peel Commission, gives 80% of that they try to give away, and Jews will have 20%. Throughout history, at every single point in time, all people have tried to do is cut Israel into smaller and smaller pieces, and eventually the time came in 1948, and again in 67, and again in 73, and we see it again today. They just, you know what, forget anything, let's just wipe them off the map. And yes, the players keep on changing, but unfortunately the ideology behind it has never been about peace.
There's an interesting dynamic with all this, though, and that is that the United States has a strategic interest. What is new is what the region is starting to shape like, the look of the region as far as who the players are. So I want to talk about that for a minute. There's been wars. Mark just laid out some of those wars, but then it's always, there's like the war between wars.
In the last 7 years, the Middle East went through an earthquake. Countries have been turned apart.
If you look at what happened in Sudan, if you look at what happened in Egypt, if you look at what happened in even in the Palestinian Authority, a lot of changes. Israel has to face new type of enemies. The countries became proxies of Iran, and Israel has to face threats from different terrorist groups, and we call it stealth wars. And the reason we're fighting those stealth wars, which is an everyday fight, is to prevent the next war.
So when you're engaging in a stealth war, and you're the lawyer advising the military, you face different kind of challenges. The other side is not engaging in the laws of armed conflict when they engage. They use civilians as targets. This is part and parcel of how they operate. So what does that put on you as the lawyer representing Israeli military?
You've touched on a crucial legal point, because once upon a time, people spoke about the law of war. And the idea was that applies in situations where armies, entire armies clash against one another. And these situations in between, the war between wars, as Rami has put it, what law actually applies there? And it really took Israel to stick its neck out initially and say, you know, these are also armed conflicts. These are wars just on a lower intensity. We need to apply the same laws. We can't get by, as much of the world has expected in the past, on just applying regular principles, say, of criminal law. The idea that terrorists are criminals, you have to arrest them, put them on trial. You can't apply that to an organization like Hezbollah, which is a more powerful military than most countries on earth, or even Hamas. So legally, that has been very significant, that the law of war is actually, it's relevant on all different levels of intensity, and including in the war between wars.
But right over there and right over there are two villages controlled by Hezbollah, and we've got, coming in our background right now, Jeeps from the Israeli Defense Force. This is the blue line. How significant of a zone is this? How dangerous of a zone is this?
You know, I must say that my experience for the past 30 years, you know, I've been to this movie before.
Yeah.
Maybe the difference is now it's a 3D movie
yeah.
with so many other forces involved. But this is a security border in Israel. There's peace now. It's a fragile peace. It's a deceptive peace.
Why do you say it? We talked about that before. Why deceptive peace?
It's deceptive because at any moment, you know, these 40,000 rockets and missiles on the border with Lebanon could, you know, be sprung and fired against Israel.
After the war, the Lebanon army took place on the forts and on the border. We see a lot of movement of the UN, but we know to the citizen vehicles that the Hezbollah own, we know they're looking out, and we know they're preparing for the next battle day.
We're asserting that Iran is actually engaging in this war through Hezbollah. Is that the sense that you have as you train?
Sure, that's what we learn also. All the weapons, the training, is all Iranian money and techniques.
You can find the Iranian regime fingerprints everywhere. In Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Lebanon, in the Palestinian arena, in Yemen, in South America.
In the north, we have Iran, Hezbollah, which is an Iranian division on our border, practically and literally and in every sense, you know, directed directly from Iran.
We have a matching challenge right now, so you can double the impact of your donation to the American Center for Law and Justice. You do that online right now at ACLJ.org. That's ACLJ.org. And whatever you're able to donate is doubled at ACLJ.org. It is a great time to support the work of the ACLJ. We celebrate the victories and we prepare for the new battles. And we have those battles raging right now. We'll be right back on Jay Sekulow Live.
It is a critical time for our nation, and the American Center for Law and Justice is on the front lines, defending life and liberty, engaging the issues that matter most to you and your family. Whether it's working to protect Americans from the dangers of radical Islam and the persecution of Christians, to defending life at the U.S. Supreme Court, to protecting your religious and constitutional freedoms, we could not do this work without you, without your support. And now your support can really make a tremendous difference. For a limited time, you can participate in the ACLJ Matching Challenge. If you make a gift now, it will be doubled. $25 becomes $50. A $100 gift becomes $200. Please stand with the ACLJ right now and call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or go online at aclj.org. Thank you for your support.
When you look at your neighbors, David, as an Israeli, you've got the leadership of Syria being propped up right now by the Russians and the Iranians. Yet you have the Sunnis, in the form of ISIS, trying to gain a foothold. And you're a lawyer that gives legal advice to the military in Israel, and you've got a border with Syria.
Yeah.
What are you facing?
You know, I'd like to quote the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. He said, "My enemy's enemy is my enemy."
Yeah.
I think that so perfectly sums up the situation which is developing in Syria, which is over the years. It's really complicated. It raises all sorts of legal questions about who exactly is the enemy, who's attacking you, who isn't attacking you at any given time. The map can actually change.
Rami, looking at it diplomatically, because you have to look at it diplomatically, there has been a realignment, a strategic realignment within the region. I mean, 20 years ago, the thought that the Israelis and the Saudis would have the kind of relationship they now have, completely unexpected. And it is the common enemy. You deal with Jordan and Egypt. What is the sense when you're dealing with those world leaders as they view Israel right now? How does al-Sisi in Egypt view Israel? How does King Abdullah in Jordan view Israel right now?
I was actually a guest of the King of Jordan in Amman, Abdullah, about 3 years ago. And he was speaking about the Arab Spring as the Arab Winter. He saw what's happening. He saw ISIS coming to its border from the Syrian side. He saw ISIS coming to his borders from the Iraqi side. And he felt very threatened about it. Sisi just spoke yesterday about the peace with Israel. It's 40 years since Sadat came to Israel, just this week. Sisi spoke about the peace with Israel as a blessing to Egypt and to the region. I believe that if we go back to the Iranian strategy that has been revealed to take over the Middle East, actually a lot of people believe that Iran wants to take over Mecca because of religious reasons. So if you take the intentions of Iran and you look at the abilities of Israel, today the Arabs, the Sunni countries, are looking at Israel's abilities to intercept missiles, for example, which we learned to do after the Gaza wars. They look at Israel's ability to defend itself. And they look at the Israeli interest to stop the Iranians. They saw the Israel war in 2006, the Second Lebanon War with Hezbollah. They saw our different wars in Gaza. They saw the ability that we have. They received some of our technologies. So today, both Sisi and Abdullah and the Gulf states leaders understand that in order to stop Iran, we have to work together.
You've traveled to the region, the Gulf states. What was your sense? Because you met with leaders while you were there.
You know, the individuals that are running those countries are the same people or families, oftentimes, who are funding the people flying planes into our buildings. So it's complicated. You don't want to rely on them as your number one ally. If it comes down to who you want to stand next to in a battle, you want to stand next to an Israeli. You don't want to stand next to an Iraqi soldier that's running away or attacking the base where the Americans are at. And so that's the sense that you play, is that there's obviously a big American presence. And that's why our president can go into Saudi Arabia and use the terminology radical Islamic terrorism, and people are not running towards the door. It's not that idea, because these regimes understand it's a threat from within to them, to their existence. And so you can call yourself a king, but your kingdom may not be very stable. You could be a prince, but the other royal family is the person writing the check to ISIS. It gets more complicated in that region than it does, I think, for the Iranians. They have a supreme leader So when they come in, they've got their guardian council of 12, but they have a supreme leader who sets all of their religious, ideological, political motivations, and their spread of their networks now, I think it's very frightening. You wouldn't think of an Iran that would fire a missile into or authorize one of its proxies to fire a missile at the Saudis.
But let's focus in on the proxy nature of this asymmetrical conflict.
Well, I think that's a great concern, especially to Israel, because of their border with Lebanon. So what we have with Iran and their involvement in the Syrian war is that now Syria is going to become like a community of Iran. I mean, that's how serious it is, and that's how serious the involvement of Iran is in Syria. And next to Syria, we have Lebanon, which now is effectively being run by Hezbollah. So on the border of Israel, what we have is Hezbollah running a country, and they have free reign. So it's not like a terrorist group operating within a country. They are basically running the country. So we have the free flow of arms, sophisticated weapons, very sophisticated, from Iran through Syria into Lebanon, sitting 150,000 missiles ready and being aimed at major Israeli cities. And so that proxy war on that border of Israel and Lebanon with Hezbollah is very serious.
We're able to do this because of your support. And whatever you're able to donate right now is doubled for the American Center for Law and Justice. So you go to aclj.org, you make a donation, that donation is doubled. It's at aclj.org. A $10 donation, that's what you're charged. That's all you're charged. That becomes $20 for us at the ACLJ, and it goes on up from there. Think about $50, it becomes $100 for the ACLJ. It is a great time so that we can continue to take on these cases, like Pastor Saw's new case out of China. We're able to do that and have these resources only because of your support for the ACLJ. We'll talk to you next time.
It is a critical time for our nation, and the American Center for Law and Justice is on the front lines, defending life and liberty, engaging the issues that matter most to you and your family. Whether it's working to protect Americans from the dangers of radical Islam and the persecution of Christians, to defending life at the U.S. Supreme Court, to protecting your religious and constitutional freedoms, we could not do this work without you, without your support. And now your support can really make a tremendous difference. For a limited time, you can participate in the ACLJ Matching Challenge. If you make a gift now, it will be doubled. $25 becomes $50. A $100 gift becomes $200. Please stand with the ACLJ right now and call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or go online at aclj.org. Thank you for your support.